This is Marcus of SelectButton here, and with James Phinney of Gigantic. We just had a chance to play the game. It's a very fast-paced, I guess Twitch-style shooter would be the best way of putting it. I'm not entirely sure. How would you describe it, James?
Well, sometimes I tell people it's part shooter, part action game, part MOBA. Certainly, depending on the characters you pick, it can play a lot like it's just a shooter. But there are characters that are more about sort of their skill interactions, more about positional play, things like that. And then there are roles, whether it's healing or like debuff kind of thing. So what we really try to do is make a game that's fast-paced, dynamic, fluid, has strategy to it, but has heroes that, depending on your gaming background, just about anybody could jump in and play and have fun with.
It definitely seemed like it. There was quite the selection. I think there were, about 10 or so characters right now?
16 in this build, yeah. And then actually internally there are 23, but not all of them have art or like real animations or anything like that, and actually the balance process on them is pretty extensive, so that takes quite a while.
Well, 23 is quite the roster. Is that going to be kind of the final one when the game does launch, or do you guys have plans for even more down the line?
I think, we'll have to see how things go. I wouldn't be surprised for it not to have that many when it launches, even though that's, later this year. Just like I said, it takes a while to get them right, and having them play right, fit in well with the other heroes is more important than having more of them.
Agreed. Well, I'm kind of curious, too, because it seems like it's a motley crew of characters you guys have assembled. Is there some type of story behind everything that's going on, or is there some type of overarching back history to Gigantic?
Sure. I don't think we've talked a whole lot about lore or sort of really presenting it in the game very well. Obviously, it's sort of a fantasy setting, pretty non-traditional, and there's sort of this massive empire where there are different rival houses that are all kind of vying for power. It's in a world where these giant creatures, the Guardians, kind of draw their power from the land, and then the different houses draw their authority from the Guardians that they control.
It's pretty interesting there. I'm not going to lie, it was just really intense to kind of get into it and get going with all the different characters. What kind of gave you guys the inspiration for the game itself? It seems like it's drawn heavily off MOBA-style stuff. Is there anything else that kind of played into that whole creation process?
Yeah, we looked at a lot of different things, and, just as gamers, you end up talking a lot about like what you like and what you don't like. Even though there are a couple of core mechanics that come from MOBAs in terms of like, picking a single hero and then like leveling up and making choices about it during the course of the game, that's actually probably one of the smaller influences. Looking at shooters and looking at a lot of the things that have happened in terms of more action-oriented RPG combat, that was a big part of it. Some of it for me personally was just really enjoying class-based combat, going back in an action setting, going back to like the original Team Fortress mod, and then wanting to take that with some of my own experience working on RPG stuff and say, what if I blended these things together? Could I get that kind of like Twitch gameplay, but with kind of depth and interesting character design of an RPG?
I think you guys have definitely managed that. I know one thing we were kind of talking about in there as well with some of the coaches. It seems like there's a different varying level of play maybe required for some characters. Do you think that's true, or do you think anyone can really just jump in and start moving with anybody they want?
I think you definitely want to find the right character for you, and you will probably even have to go so far as like really kind of explicitly label these when the game's out live. So, we look at some of the characters, and some of them can get described as being more complex or less complex, but it really depends on who you are as a gamer. So I know that sort of in your group here, you had one person playing Vidasi. She's a healer, and she's got more of the kind of like RPG skill interaction. So she's got this like, use this skill, and now you're sacrificing health, but you've got these orbs, and then this skill uses up the orbs, and that skill uses the orbs for something else, and you're losing your own health the whole time you're doing this. And so there's a sort of balancing this rotation of skills and the way the skills interact. And so for some people, that's totally overwhelming, even though they're not having to do the same level of kind of Twitch in combat. But for other people, that's just a piece of cake to pick up because that's, the kind of gaming that they do. On the other hand, there are characters that move real fast, characters that are slow, characters that are more about tactical positioning. There's Griselma who summons these portal beasts, and so she doesn't even have to do fighting herself, but she needs to be smart about where she's putting her creatures. And then there are characters that are very shooter, and there's like a sniper where you just straight up like you right-click and now you're zoomed in, and if you're not a good shot, don't take that character. But if you are, that's probably one of the easiest characters to pick up.
No, I was actually using that the first round. I found it pretty intense. Definitely a little bit of a learning curve, but seemed pretty intuitive in a lot of ways. Did you guys draw a lot of just general stuff from first-person shooters to really inspire some of the controls, or was it just kind of?
I mean, the controls are straight up third-person shooter controls, which are, basically first-person shooter controls, but the camera's different. And you have to make some other choices about some things. But that was part of making it a game that people could just kind of jump in. It's like sometimes I give a little spiel before people sit down and play, and it's like it's WASD movement, and it's shift to sprint, and it's spacebar to jump, and you probably didn't need to explain these things, right? Click the left mouse button, you're going to attack. And so using that as a starting point really helped put the game, sort of in position to be what it's become, and put the right mindset for players, or for the devs actually when they're playing it, of like, this game's going to be fluid, it's going to feel smooth, that it's not a game where we just make excuses based on sort of clever design interact. Like, the game just needs to feel good moment to moment, and that's certainly something you get from both shooters and action games.
Oh, it definitely seems like you guys have managed that. Well, my last kind of questions here are, what platforms can we expect to see this on, and what kind of release date are you guys shooting for currently?
Yeah, so it will come out later this year on both Windows 10 and Xbox One. You'll actually be able to have one account that's shared across. I know not everybody's going to have like a gaming PC and an Xbox One, but if you have both, that's great. You can sort of, depending maybe on what hero you want to play, what kind of controls you want to use. But also, if you're visiting friends or hanging out, you can play it on either platform. It's going to be free to play, and so there's very little barrier to you just getting in and playing.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys have definitely a plan for it. I hope to see maybe some esports eventually. Is that maybe a plan in the works as well?
We'd love to see that happen. We're certainly trying to make a game that's worthy of that. I think that we feel like it's a thing where community needs to give that momentum first. People need to feel like they want it out of your game, that just going and saying, we're making an esport game and here are the big tournaments and stuff isn't the way that really happens. And so we've tried to make a game that's fun to watch, that's got real strategic depth, that's exciting to play, that has drama to it. I think you guys saw like some of the ways games can be blowouts, but also ways games can be really close and have room for comebacks. And so we think all those things should put it in that position, and we'll see how players respond.
Definitely, I look forward to it. Well, that's going to be it here. I'm with James Phinney of Gigantic, and thank you guys for watching. This is Mark with the Select Button.